I never imagined I'd hear his voice again. That was the first thought that struck me when the lawyer pressed play. The room fell into a silence so heavy it felt ancient, like dust settling inside an abandoned chapel. The curtains barely stirred, though the window was open, and I felt a tiny draft brush against the back of my neck. A whisper of cold air, or maybe just nerves. Then, with a soft digital crackle, his face appeared. Mr. Alden Beringer. The man I had cared for in the final 11 months of his life. My patient. My responsibility. My quiet companion in a house too large for its memories. He had died a week ago, yet here he was, sitting in his leather study chair, leaning forward slightly as if trying to bridge the distance between life and death. The golden lamplight behind him cast a soft halo over his shoulders. He blinked uncertainly at the camera, unaware of the storm his words were about to unleash. "If you're watching this," he began softly, "then I've already left this world, and there are things I need to say." Across the long oak table I heard a breath hitch, probably Clara. She was dramatic like that, but I kept my eyes on the screen, my heart beating in slow, cautious pulses. This wasn't my family, this wasn't my history. I was a nurse, meant to fade quietly into the background after my patient passed, and yet, for reasons I didn't understand, the lawyer insisted I attend the reading of the will. I thought it would be simple, a short message, a farewell. Nothing more. But wills, they hold stories, and sometimes those stories hold echoes that refuse to stay buried. I should have known there would be more. This was how it all began. The lawyer's office carried the scent of aging paper and polished mahogany, the kind of place where secrets felt safe and time moved differently. Every wall was lined with towering bookshelves, crammed with legal volumes and old case files. A ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, stirring a slow rhythm through the air. I sat at the far end of the table, half hidden behind a potted fern that leaned slightly to the left. My hands were clasped together in my lap, fingers cold and stiff. I could feel the weight of the family's eyes without looking up. The Beringers, gathered like a storm front. Matthew, the eldest, was a man who had inherited his father's jawline, but not his warmth. His charcoal suit was perfectly pressed, his hair carefully slicked back, everything controlled, except the anger he failed to hide. He kept tapping his thumb against the wood, as if counting every second he considered wasted. Clara, the middle child, was wrapped in pearls and scented heavily with some sharp floral perfume that overtook the room. She held a lace handkerchief in trembling fingers, pressing it beneath her eyes, though her face remained suspiciously dry. Jonah, the youngest, was softer in voice and posture, always slightly unsure where to place his hands. He looked at me with a kind of puzzled sympathy, as though trying to understand why I'd been invited at all, as though sensing the story beneath the surface. And finally, Mrs. Margaret Beringer, the widow. Silver hair pinned flawlessly, posture straight enough to snap. She had spoken to me only a handful of times during Alden's illness. Brief, polite, chilly. She sat closest to the laptop displaying the video, hands folded tightly around a handkerchief she never used. She never once looked at me. Not then, not ever. And yet I remembered the way she'd sit beside her husband's bed when she visited. Distant, polite, a ghost moving through the motions of love. I'd often wondered if grief had hollowed her long before he died. The lawyer cleared his throat, his fingers shaking slightly as he adjusted his glasses. "Thank you all for coming," he said, though his tone suggested anything but gratitude. As Mr. Beringer's last instructions stated, this recording must be watched in full, with everyone present. His eyes drifted toward me briefly, uncertain, apologetic. Yes, even me. That alone should have been a warning. The lights dimmed slightly as the video settled into focus, and Alden began to speak. The screen flickered. Alden adjusted his collar. Behind him, the old grandfather clock ticked steadily. The same clock I dusted every Sunday, the same clock whose chimes he once told me were the heartbeat of the house. He let out a breath. "My family," he began. "I know this isn't what you expected. I'm sorry for that." Clara's posture tightened. Matthew's jaw flexed. Jonah leaned forward just slightly. Margaret remained perfectly still, like a statue carved from winter. "But I need you to hear me," Alden continued. "Truly hear me. There are things I never said, regrets I never voiced, and truths I never dared to speak aloud." The room felt like it narrowed, shrinking until it held only the video and our held breaths. "You may not like what I'm about to say," he warned gently, "but my life is over. Pretending cannot help me anymore, and each of you deserves honesty." He swallowed hard, and so does she. That single word, she, sliced through the room. Margaret's head jerked toward the screen. Clara stiffened. Matthew muttered a sharp, "Oh, come on." But Alden kept going, unaware of the reactions happening months into his future. "I'm speaking," he said slowly, "about Leah. My name." The sound of it echoed inside me as if spoken inside a cathedral. I froze. "She was my caretaker," he continued, "but more importantly, she was my friend. She listened to me when the long nights made pain feel endless. She spoke to me like I was more than a dying man. She saw me, the parts of me even I had forgotten." My throat tightened. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't known I mattered like that. "She held my hand through the worst moments," Alden said, his voice cracking slightly. "She reminded me what kindness felt like. And in my final year, when loneliness felt heavier than illness, she made life bearable." Matthew scoffed. Clara blinked rapidly, stunned. Jonah turned his gaze to me, full of questions. Margaret's face hardened into something cold, metallic. Alden exhaled shakily. "I didn't make this recording to shame you," he said. "I made it because there are truths I cannot leave unspoken. You may believe you were good to me in your own ways. Perhaps you were. But you were not there. Not really. Not when it mattered." His voice lowered to a trembling softness. "Leah was." I could feel every pair of eyes drilling into me. Disbelief, suspicion, anger. I kept my gaze on the table, my pulse racing in my ears. And then Alden said the words that changed everything. "This is why I am leaving the largest portion of my estate to Leah." Silence didn't just fall, it shattered. Matthew slammed his palm against the table so suddenly the laptop shook. Clara let out a strangled gasp, half cry, half disbelief. Margaret's fingers curled so tightly around her handkerchief it threatened to tear. My own breath caught in my chest. I felt my face go hot, my pulse pounding behind my ears. "This is ridiculous," Matthew growled, his voice vibrating with fury. "A caretaker? A nurse? Are we seriously doing this? Dad must have been manipulated." "Matthew," Jonah warned softly, but his brother shook him off with a snarl. No, I'm not pretending this makes sense." He turned sharply toward the lawyer. "Halden, is this legal? Did she coach him, pressure him, take advantage of him? Because that's the only way this is even remotely plausible." Heat crawled up my neck. Emotion, embarrassment, anger, fear, tangled inside me. I began, but the words evaporated. Clara's voice cracked in, sharp and trembling. She was with him every day, every single day. Of course she influenced him. How could she not? She looked at me with something between accusation and heartbreak, and then Margaret finally spoke, but not to her children, not to the lawyer, not even to the screen. To me. You. Her voice was lethal, quiet in a way that froze the room. You wormed your way in. You pretended kindness, pretended loyalty, and you dared to stand there while he... "I didn't pretend anything," I whispered, unable to hold back. "I cared for him, that's all." Her eyes pierced mine like blades, sharp, cold, like grief had turned to steel. Cared. she repeated bitterly, or calculated. Nobody breathed, not even me. On the screen, Alden continued speaking, unaware of the chaos unraveling in his wake. I know this will surprise you, perhaps anger you, but it is my decision. Margaret released a choked sound, part gasp, part fury. My reasons, Alden added, go deeper than you think. The room stilled again. Even Matthew leaned in slightly, fists still clenched, waiting. But the video kept going without revealing anything more. Not yet. Not the deeper reason. Not the real secret. Just a hint. A doorway left unlit, and the darkness behind it was about to open. Matthew shot to his feet, pacing the room like a caged storm cloud. She must have tricked him. People like her. People like me, I repeated sharply, unable to hold back the burn in my chest. Nurses, he snapped. Caretakers. You prey on the vulnerable, on lonely men. You get close, whisper in their ears, earn their trust. That's enough, Jonah snapped for the first time, his voice steady but trembling at the edges. Matthew turned on him. Don't start. She took advantage. She didn't, Jonah cut in. You weren't there. You didn't see them. The entire room froze. I blinked at him. Saw us? What did he mean? Jonah swallowed. His eyes darted to me briefly, then back to the table. I visited Dad more than you think, he said quietly. And I watched her. She never. He shook his head. She treated him like he mattered, like he was still a person, not a burden. Clara scoffed, tears finally spilling, real ones. Dad wasn't a burden. Jonah looked at her with something soft and broken. Yes, he was, he said at last, to all of us. We acted like spending time with him was charity, like visiting meant sacrificing something. No one spoke, because no one could argue. Even Margaret's face twitched, her composure trembling. Jonah exhaled shakily. She didn't manipulate him, he said, voice low. She saved him. My chest tightened. No one had ever said something like that about me. Certainly not in front of a table of furious heirs. But Matthew wasn't moved. He threw up his hands. Oh, please, you're defending her? You're defending this? Jonah, wake up. Enough, Margaret snapped. And when she snapped, the room obeyed. Her grief sliced through the air. Her rage hummed beneath her skin. She spoke with the tone of a woman betrayed by life itself. He was my husband, she hissed. My partner, my life, and I will not have his memory twisted by some outsider. Mrs. Barringer, I said softly, I never... Silence. The word punched the air, hollowing everything around it. My throat tightened, my hands curled in my lap. Every instinct told me to run, get out, escape this family's implosion. But then Alden's voice rose from the laptop again. There is more you need to hear. The room froze. Every head turned toward the screen. Even Matthew stopped pacing. And for the first time that day, Margaret's expression shifted from rage to fear. Alden inhaled deeply on the screen, his breath shaky, his hands trembling slightly. I made mistakes, he said. Many, some you know, some you don't. But all of them led me to a truth I couldn't ignore. He glanced down, gathering courage. Then he looked up again, straight into the camera. Leah wasn't just my caretaker. She reminded me of something I lost long ago. Matthew scoffed. Clara rolled her eyes, but Jonah stared at the screen as though trying to read between every pixel. Alden continued, She reminded me of compassion, the kind I once had before life hardened me, before choices, mine and yours, fractured this family. Clara's hand finally dropped from her face. Matthew's pacing stilled. Margaret looked like someone had punched the air out of her lungs. She listened to me, Alden said, in ways none of you did, not because she pitied me, not because she wanted anything, but because she understood loneliness. My breath caught. Loneliness. I felt that word land somewhere deep, as if the past year replayed itself in a single heartbeat. Long nights sitting beside his bed, telling him stories to distract from the pain, listening to his regrets and memories, whispering reassurances when he feared sleep might be the last time he closed his eyes. But Alden kept going. "I knew you would be angry," he said quietly, "but please understand. This isn't about money. It's about truth. It's about the kind of love we forget to show until it's too late." Margaret flinched. Alden's voice softened. In my final months, I had time to think, time to confront everything I'd avoided, the family I built, the distance that grew, the things I never said. He shook his head, eyes glistening. "And the secret I carried." Attention tightened like a rope across the room. Secret. Jonah straightened. Clara stilled. Matthew's anger paused mid-smolder. Even I leaned forward, breath caught in my throat. What secret? Alden's mouth trembled. "You deserve to know why Leah mattered. You all deserve to know what happened 26 years ago." 26 years ago? My pulse raced. I had known Alden only 11 months. 11. How could something connected to me stretch far back into his past? Alden took a deep breath on the screen, unsteady, waited. Then he said softly, "Everything changed the day I met someone, and everything after that changed the day I lost her." Clara's voice trembled. "What is he talking about?" Matthew muttered. "This is insane." But Jonah whispered something I almost didn't hear. "It wasn't Leah," he said. "It can't be." My brows furrowed. Jonah knew something? He sat straighter, eyes darting between his mother and the screen, confusion and realization twisting inside him. Margaret stared rigidly, face pale. She whispered one fragile word. No. Not to her children. Not to me. Not to the screen. To a memory. Alden continued, voice thickening. "I kept the truth hidden. From all of you. Even from Margaret. Especially from Margaret." She closed her eyes. Matthew stared at her, stunned. "Mom? Did you know something about this?" She shook her head. A tiny trembling gesture, and her silence screamed louder than words. Clara clutched her pearls. "How long? How long has Dad been hiding something like this?" The entire family turned toward the video, toward the man who had already left them behind, toward a truth that had waited 26 years to surface. And Alden said, "What happened back then shaped the rest of my life, and it shaped my decisions in these final days, including what I chose to leave, and to whom." My breath hitched. I didn't know what he was talking about, but I could feel it. The pull of something old, buried, heavy with consequence. Jonah whispered, "Dad, what did you do?" Alden leaned closer in the video, and then he spoke the words that cracked the past open. "This is the story I never told you, the story I couldn't leave this world without confessing." On the screen, Alden shifted in his chair, running a trembling hand through his thin silver hair. His voice lowered, as if he were afraid someone in the present could still overhear him from the past. 26 years ago, he said, "I made a choice that changed everything." Matthew exhaled loudly. Clara clutched her handkerchief so tightly it bunched like a crumpled flower. Jonah leaned forward with a strange intensity. Not anger, not confusion, but anticipation, as if some part of him already knew. And Margaret, she didn't move, not a breath, not a blink. Only the faint tremor at the corner of her mouth betrayed her. Alden swallowed. "I've spent my entire life pretending certain memories didn't exist, but memories, they echo. They always come back." I felt that line settle into my bones. It echoed something inside me as well, something I couldn't name. Alden continued, "I met someone, a woman. Her name was—" He hesitated. His eyes darkened with remorse. "I won't speak her name here, not to protect her, but because I failed her." Matthew muttered under his breath. Of course. But Alden kept talking. She wasn't part of our world. She didn't have money. She didn't have influence. But she had kindness and courage and a way of seeing people as they truly were. His gaze flickered, almost toward whatever memory he stood in. I knew her for a year, one single year, but it changed me. Clara's lips pressed into a tight line. Alden continued, I loved her. The room rippled, like a shockwave moving through still water. Margaret's face went white. Jonah turned his head slowly, looking at his mother as though seeing her for the first time. Clara whispered, Oh my God. Matthew's jaw tightened so hard I heard the faint crack of pressure. Alden breathed out, and she loved me. I felt the room tilt, like gravity shifted just an inch off balance. Loved? Loved someone else? 26 years ago? I kept still, silent, but inside my chest, something sank. Not because of jealousy, but because I suddenly understood. The inheritance wasn't just gratitude. This message was rooted in something older, deeper, heavier. Alden went on. But life is crueler than we expect. Or maybe I was the cruel one. I chose security over love, expectations over truth. I let her walk away. Or perhaps I walked away first. His voice cracked. And when I finally looked back, she was gone. Clara covered her mouth. Matthew glared at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. Margaret dropped her gaze to the floor, her fingers trembling around her wedding band. Alden's next words felt quieter, more fragile. She told me she needed time, that leaving would keep someone safe. His lips trembled. I didn't understand what she meant. A thick silence. She never contacted me again. The clock behind him ticked on, relentless, and I didn't go after her. He lowered his head. That is the regret that ate me alive. Jonah whispered, Dad. Alden lifted his eyes. I thought I had buried that chapter, but grief keeps old ghosts awake. And then something happened that brought it all back. My breath hitched. I didn't know why, but something inside me felt wrong. Like I stood on the edge of a cliff without realizing I'd walked there. Alden leaned closer to the camera. 26 years later, he said quietly, a stranger arrived in my home. My heart pounded. She knocked on my door in the middle of the afternoon. Matthew scoffed. Dad, what does this have to do with the will? Alden answered as if hearing him across time. She brought a letter. Clara gasped. Margaret stiffened. Jonah whispered something, but nobody heard it. Alden closed his eyes. The letter was from the woman I loved. The room went utterly still. Even the dust seemed to stop moving. Alden opened his eyes again, voice trembling. She had passed away. Margaret's lips parted, but no sound came out. But before she died, she wrote to me, a letter she never sent. A letter that traveled years before it reached me. Clara whispered, Who delivered it? On the screen, Alden looked exhausted, like the memory itself weighed him down. The woman who brought the letter didn't say much, only that she had promised to deliver it one day. Matthew scoffed, so Dad got sentimental in his last year and decided to throw away his estate over some... Jonah shot him a look so sharp he stopped speaking. Alden continued, She told me something else, something that broke me. My heart hammered. His voice grew softer, almost reverent. She told me the woman I loved had a daughter. Clara gasped loudly. Matthew stiffened, dark suspicion filling his eyes. Jonah's breath hitched. Margaret pressed a hand to her chest, not dramatically, but in real pain. Alden whispered, A daughter who grew up without a father. A chill ran through me so strong I almost shivered. A daughter? A secret child? This was no longer just a love story. This was a wound that shaped a man's final choices. Alden continued, I assume she's an adult now, maybe with her own life, maybe with no memory of her mother's pain. He swallowed hard. But I never met her. And I never knew her name. An uncomfortable silence washed over the room. Clara stammered, "So? Dad may have had a child out there?" Matthew slammed his palm on the table again, rattling pens. "This is absurd. This is hypothetical. There's no proof." Margaret closed her eyes, just briefly, but enough for me to see something break. Jonah's voice was small. But if she existed, where is she now? Alden answered, "I don't know. I never will." Then his tone changed, softer, deeper, more vulnerable. But when that stranger left, when the door closed, when I was alone with that letter, he paused. I realized something. I felt the air shift, not physically, emotionally, like every unsaid truth in the room leaned forward to listen. Alden whispered, "The daughter would be 26 now." My heart skipped. 26. I was 26. My breath faltered, and Jonah noticed. His eyes snapped toward me with a flicker of suspicion. No, that's impossible. I didn't know Alden before last year. My life, my history, didn't cross paths with his. This was coincidence, a number, nothing more. But then Alden said, and something in me couldn't stop wondering. Matthew growled, "Wondering what?" The screen flickered. Alden stared deep into the camera, his voice trembling with honesty. What if she was closer than I thought? My pulse pounded so loudly the room faded for a moment. Closer? How close? Close enough to... No. This was ridiculous. He couldn't mean... But Alden was still speaking. What if she had been in my home without either of us knowing the truth? My breath froze. Matthew snapped his gaze toward me. Clara stared at me with widening eyes. Jonah looked at me the longest, not accusing, but searching. I felt the truth slam into the room like thunder. They thought he meant me. Matthew pointed a sharp, trembling finger at me. No way, this is insane. Clara whispered, "Leah, how old are you?" I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, pulsing. Jonah's voice was softer, gentler. 26, right? I nodded slowly, because lying seemed impossible with all those eyes on me. Margaret stared at me like she was trying to see something beneath my skin, something familiar, something that terrified her. The lawyer cleared his throat nervously. "Everyone, please. We don't know what Mr. Behringer means yet. Let's allow the video to continue." But Matthew wouldn't sit. He jabbed a finger toward me. "You knew him. You had access. You heard his stories. You could have played into this." "I didn't even know this story existed," I shot back, my voice shaking with anger and fear. "I didn't know he had a past like this. I didn't..." "You expect us to believe that?" Matthew barked. Jonah cut in sharply. "Enough!" He stood protectively between me and his brother, an unexpected movement that startled even him. Matthew scoffed. "You're defending her because you've always been soft." Jonah's jaw tightened. "This isn't about me or her. It's about Dad's truth." But Matthew wasn't listening. He pointed at the screen again. "Dad is implying the caretaker, this stranger, could be his long-lost daughter. This is the setup, the manipulation. She gets the estate. She gets the sympathy. I am not," I stammered. "I'm not his daughter. I didn't even know him before I was hired. I have no connection to any woman he..." Clara snapped suddenly. "Do you even know who your father is?" The question hit me so hard my throat closed. I opened my mouth, then shut it, because the truth was more complicated, more fragile, more vulnerable than I ever admitted to anyone. I had never known my biological father. My mother refused to speak about him, ever. Not a name, not a hint, not a memory, just a void, a silence, an ache. Matthew saw the hesitation and his face twisted with triumph. "There, look at that. She doesn't know. She has no idea who her father is." "That doesn't mean anything," Jonah snapped. "It means everything," Matthew spat. Dad left her the estate because he thinks she's his daughter. Clara murmured, "Maybe she is." My pulse hammered painfully. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "I'm not. I can't be. But my voice cracked, because I didn't know. Not really. Margaret suddenly slammed her hand on the table. "Enough!" Her voice cracked like a whip. Everyone froze. She stared at me with wild, fear-filled eyes. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked human, frightened, broken, small. She whispered, "You can't be her." Her voice trembled over the last word. "You can't be that daughter." Her breath shook, and I realized she knew something. On the screen, Alden leaned forward, unaware of the uproar he'd just caused. "I searched for her," he admitted quietly, "but the trail was gone. There were too many unanswered questions, too much time lost." He looked down. I didn't know where to begin. He looked up, so I did the only thing I could. My heart pounded painfully. "I tried," he whispered, "to make peace with the possibility that she was out there." He blinked tears from his eyes, and that I would never know her. Clara wiped her cheek. Jonah swallowed hard. Matthew stared, jaw clenched. Alden offered a sad, fragile smile. But then, Leah came into my house. My breath stopped. Clara gasped. Matthew's face twisted. Jonah stared at the screen, not at me. Alden continued. "She walked through my door one quiet afternoon, holding her nursing bag, her notepad, her gentle voice, and something in me," he touched his chest, "something in me recognized her." My hands went cold. No, this was too much, too coincidental. "I thought it was grief," Alden said, "or memory, or guilt." He shook his head. "But the more time passed, the more she cared for me, the more I felt a connection." I couldn't breathe. "Not romantic," he said firmly. "Not anything inappropriate, just familiar." My heartbeat thundered. Something in her eyes, her kindness, her resilience, felt like the woman I once knew. My stomach dropped. Margaret let out a trembling exhale. Clara whispered, "Dad, what are you saying?" But Alden wasn't finished. He inhaled deeply on the screen. "I don't know who she is, and I may be wrong." He swallowed. "But before I died, I wanted to honor that connection, honor the possibility, honor the hope." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Then he said the line that broke everything wide open. "Leah may not be my daughter." My breath shook. But she could be. The video continued, the screen flickering faintly in the dim light of the lawyer's office. Alden leaned forward, his hands resting heavily on the desk, as if the weight of every secret pressed into his bones. "I need to say this clearly," he whispered, voice shaking. "Leah, you were never meant to inherit simply for your care. You were chosen because you reminded me what it meant to be seen, what it meant to be loved without condition. You are the echo of what I lost all those years ago." The room went completely silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Margaret's lips parted slightly, her hands trembling as she pressed them together. Matthew looked like he might explode. Clara sat frozen, pearls slipping through her fingers. Alden continued, "I feared I would never find her, the daughter I never knew, the woman I lost before life could give me another chance. And when you walked into my life, something inside me whispered, 'You are a fragment of what I've mourned.'" He swallowed, voice catching. "I don't know if I was imagining it, but in your presence, I felt a connection deeper than reason. And in my final act, I wanted to honor it. I wanted to give you a place that was yours, regardless of biology, because love is not always measured by blood." I pressed my hands against my knees, heart hammering. Matthew leaned forward, lips moving like he was trying to speak without sound. Clara's breath trembled. Jonah's eyes were locked on me, piercing, searching for answers I didn't have. And Margaret, she finally spoke, Her voice was barely audible, quivering, but it sliced through the tension like glass. You were never meant to know this, she whispered, and yet it was always there. Always. Everyone turned toward her. Even Matthew, rigid with fury, softened slightly. Curiosity mingled with suspicion. Margaret took a deep breath, eyes flickering toward the laptop screen. 26 years ago, he wasn't wrong. There was someone I tried to protect. I knew she would come into your life one day. Somehow, some way. Matthew's face darkened. Mom, what are you saying? She shook her head slowly. I can't say much, but I can say this. He chose her. Not because she was family by blood, not because she was entitled, but because she needed acknowledgement, because she deserved it. Her voice cracked. Leah, do you understand? You were always the one who gave him life in those final days. You reminded him of what was worth loving, and for that, he honored you. The words were heavy, almost unbearable. I blinked. My hands shook. Everything I had thought about inheritance, about my role, about the connection, shifted in a heartbeat. Jonah leaned forward, whispering to his mother, Mom, you mean she isn't? Margaret shook her head. No, she isn't the daughter, but she carries what he lost in ways none of us could. I exhaled shakily, heart pounding. I wasn't blood, I wasn't the daughter, and yet somehow I was chosen. Matthew's fists slammed against the table. This is insane. He's dead. You're telling me he left everything to a nurse because of some fantasy about a woman from his past? A ghost? Clara shook, tears streaming. She reminded him of love, Matthew. That's why. It's not manipulation. It's memory. It's connection. Matthew's jaw tightened, rage simmering beneath the surface. It's unfair, he roared. I'm his son. I lived under the same roof. I followed the same rules. And she walks in and takes everything? Jonah's voice was calm, sharp, unyielding. No, she didn't take anything. He gave it. He chose. And maybe for the first time, he made a choice that wasn't about duty or expectation or greed. Matthew's face flushed. He opened his mouth to argue, but Margaret held up a hand. Enough, she said. Her voice carried authority I hadn't heard before. Let him rest in peace. He made a choice, and we will survive this, even if we do not understand it. Clara wiped her tears, nodding. Jonah exhaled slowly. Matthew's shoulders slumped slightly, though the anger still burned. I sat frozen, my chest tight, my mind swirling. I didn't deserve this. I wasn't blood. And yet, the echoes of his will had found me. On the screen, Alden's voice grew softer, almost a whisper. Leah, if you are watching this, I want you to know one thing. My life ended knowing you cared, that I was seen, understood, remembered in ways that mattered, that my regrets, my losses, my love were not in vain. He paused, blinked slowly, tears glistening in his eyes. Do not feel guilty. Do not doubt. You were my light in the darkness, and if you keep living with compassion, then everything I lost, everything I feared, will not be wasted. Some inherit wealth, others inherit memories. You inherit both. But more importantly, you inherit the truth that kindness echoes farther than blood. The video ended. The screen went black. No one spoke for long moments. The clock ticked. Dust settled. Breath came in quiet gasps. Margaret finally exhaled. I will never understand everything, she whispered, but perhaps this is how he wanted it. Clara murmured, somehow, it feels right. Matthew didn't speak. He sat, rigid, staring at the blank screen, anger and awe and disbelief warring across his face. Jonah looked at me. I think he would have wanted you to know, to understand, and maybe that's enough. I swallowed, hands trembling. I didn't know I could mean so much to someone I barely knew." Margaret's eyes softened slightly. "You reminded him," she said, voice breaking, "that love isn't always about family. Sometimes it's about being human." I looked at the screen one last time. Alden's face frozen in time, eyes gentle, hands resting on the desk, whispering truths that the living could barely bear. And I realized, finally, the weight of inheritance wasn't gold. It wasn't property. It was memory. It was acknowledgement. It was love. The echoes of the will would never leave me, and in that I found a strange, solemn peace. The lawyer cleared his throat, the faint click of his chair echoing in the silent room. Matthew's fists remained clenched, jaw tight, teeth grinding. Clara's shoulders shook as she tried to hold back tears. Jonah's face was calm, but his eyes betrayed a storm of understanding and sorrow. Margaret remained seated, her hands folded in her lap, silent but trembling. I felt the weight of their stares, the unspoken questions pressing against my chest. Why her? Why not us? Why did he choose her over his blood? I exhaled shakily. "I didn't ask for this," I whispered, voice barely audible. "But he trusted me. That's why he chose me." Matthew slammed his palm onto the table again. "You don't understand. He could have left this to any of us. All these years we stayed loyal. We took care of him in our own way." Jonah spoke, voice calm but firm. "Matthew, loyalty is not measured by proximity or convenience. He was seen by her. And maybe that's what mattered the most." Matthew's face twisted in disbelief. "You're defending her now?" Clara's voice quavered. "Maybe defending him, Matthew. Maybe defending what he felt." Margaret finally stood, her figure frail but commanding in the quiet. "You can argue, yell, or cry," she said, voice cracking with years of unspoken grief. "But none of us can change what he decided. And maybe he wanted someone to feel the gratitude, the love, the acknowledgement that we failed to give." A silence followed, heavy, pressing, as if the room itself absorbed her words. I looked at the estate papers lying on the table. The numbers, the assets, the properties, they felt surreal, almost meaningless. What did it matter, really? Gold could not replace the lessons he taught me. Money could not resurrect the life he had lost. And yet, responsibility weighed on me like a stone in my chest. I could walk away, leave it all to the family, return to my ordinary life. But I couldn't. He had trusted me. He had seen something in me that the rest of them never did. And perhaps honoring him meant honoring that trust. I took a deep breath. "I will take it," I said quietly. "Not for me, not for gain, but because he believed it mattered, because he believed in me when no one else did." Clara nodded slowly, tears still wet on her cheeks. Jonah's lips pressed into a thin line, thoughtful. Matthew's face remained dark, stormy, but the tension softened slightly. Margaret's eyes softened, a faint glimmer of relief passing across her features. The lawyer looked at me, nodding slowly. "Very well. Then it is yours, by Mr. Barringer's wishes." As I signed the documents, the lawyer handed me a small envelope. It was sealed with wax. No name, no explanation. Curious, I broke the seal. Inside, a letter. A note in Alden's unmistakable handwriting. "Leah. If you are reading this, I want you to understand one last thing. The estate is not the only inheritance. There is a secret I must leave you, something I could not entrust to my family, nor could I carry it into the grave without sharing it with the one who understood my final days. Somewhere in the east wing of my home, behind the old library shelf, you will find a small box. Inside is a token of my family's history, and a letter meant only for you. Take it, keep it, understand it, and remember, Kindness echoes farther than blood. My pulse raced. A token of history? A letter meant only for me? Margaret noticed my reaction. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. Some stories aren't meant for everyone. Perhaps he trusted you because he knew you would honor it properly. I rose, my hands trembling as I folded the letter. A mixture of anticipation, fear, and curiosity washed over me. Jonah whispered, "Maybe this is the part we're not ready for." But I couldn't wait. I had to see, had to know. I left the lawyer's office, the envelope heavy in my hands, and walked through the grand halls of Alden's estate. The air smelled faintly of old wood, polished stone, and memories. Every step echoed with the whispers of the past. I found the east wing. The library shelf was massive, filled with dust-covered tomes, and behind it, a small box, a brass latch engraved with a crest I didn't recognize. With trembling fingers, I lifted the lid. Inside, a collection of letters, photographs, and a small, intricately carved key. I opened the first letter. It was addressed to no one but me. And as I read the first words, I realized the full weight of Alden's final message. Leah, what I am leaving you now is more than property or wealth. It is the story I could never tell aloud. It is the truth of my family, the legacy of their choices, and the echoes of all the love I could not save. Guard it well, learn from it, and let it guide you, as it has guided me in my final days. I understood, finally. This inheritance wasn't just money, it wasn't just gratitude, it was history, it was love. It was a truth that the living had failed to honor. Until now. And I realized the will, the posthumous messages, the letters, the secrets. They weren't just echoes, they were instructions, a life lesson, a charge to carry forward. I stepped back, the box held close, and for the first time, I felt the quiet weight of responsibility, not just for the estate, not just for Alden's trust, but for the echoes of a life that could not speak for itself, until I listened. After I had taken the box, closed the east wing door, and felt the echoes of Alden's presence fade behind me, the family gathered quietly in the library. Matthew sat slumped, staring at nothing, jaw tight, eyes cold. Clara sat beside him, still trembling, hands clutched in her lap. Jonah leaned against the wall, silent, thoughtful. Margaret paced slowly, whispering to herself, "He wanted this. He wanted this." Matthew finally spoke, voice low, tight with defeat. "I can't believe it. All these years. And he trusted her?" Clara shook her head. "It's not about trust, Matthew. It's about acknowledgement. You saw the man, but she saw him." Jonah's eyes met mine. He wanted someone to remember him, not just his wealth, but his life, his choices, his regrets. Matthew's hands trembled. He closed his eyes. I never understood him." Margaret's voice softened. "Perhaps none of us ever did, but maybe this is how he wanted his story carried forward." I listened silently. The echoes of the will weren't just words. They were lessons, whispers of a life that deserved more than silence, a charge to carry forward truth, compassion, and memory. I returned to the east wing, box in hand, and set it on the desk. The letters, the key, the photographs, all of it pulsed with the weight of someone else's life, a life carefully curated, preserved, and entrusted to me. I could have walked away. I could have handed everything to the family, avoided the responsibility. But I knew Alden didn't leave me this for convenience. He left it because he trusted me to honor it. I opened the small carved box fully. Inside was a journal, meticulously written, filled with confessions, regrets, memories, and lessons, a key to a safety deposit box, and a single faded photograph of Alden with the woman he had loved decades ago. I realized the final inheritance wasn't money. It wasn't property. It wasn't the house. It was the story, the echo of a life, the weight of a man's love and regrets. I made my choice. I would preserve every word, every memory, every truth. I would honor him by sharing it in ways he could not, and in doing so, the estate, the wealth, and the legacy, they would serve their true purpose. I stepped to the window, the sun slipping behind the trees, painting the room in golden light. The letters in my hands seemed to hum, alive with the voices of the past. I whispered softly, to no one but the empty room. Some inherit gold. Some inherit a house. I inherited something far greater, a life remembered, a story preserved, and a truth that refuses to fade. Alden's words returned in my mind. Kindness echoes farther than blood. I understood now, not wealth, not status, not even family ties. What mattered most was memory, connection, acknowledgement. The shadows of the estate stretched long across the floor, and I knew every choice, every action, every letter I would preserve, every truth I would honor, would carry his echoes forward. For the world may forget, time may move on, but stories endure. And as I closed the box gently, I felt the presence of Alden in the room, quiet, grateful, at peace. I whispered one last line, knowing it would resonate far beyond these walls. Every inheritance hides a story. Every story leaves an echo. And I am listening.
Thank you for watching this story until the end. If you found it meaningful, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue bringing powerful, real stories from around the world.